What's going on, football fans? It's me, J.R. Clark, back again with a breaking news pound for pound ATL. While I was taking some time to spend a little bit of time with my daughter and play a video game, the Atlanta Falcons decided to do the right thing and hire a defensive coordinator while my eyes weren't glued to Twitter. But that's how these things go. Which is, why we're here tonight, why we're talking about it. I know some of y'all are probably enjoying the video that me and Jonathan did about the upcoming All Star games, Shrine Bowl, and the Senior Bowl. But I figured we got a DC now, need to talk about it. I put out a tweet, earlier, like kind of urging, quote unquote, urging the Falcons to go ahead and get a DC hired before these games kick off because it's important time, right? Getting evaluation of these new draft picks or what have you. And so I guess they went ahead and obliged. Uh, and our new DC is Ryan Nielsen or Nielsen, I think is how you say it. Ryan Nielsen of the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, he has a record, a history with Terry Fontenot being the, player personnel guy over there. Probably dealt with Nielsen quite a bit in trying to figure out who to bring in free agent wise. So he must have done a pretty good job in his interview in the game plan that he had going forth because, the Saints themselves have had a good defense over the past few years under the guidance of Dennis Allen and also Ryan Nielsen. Nielsen got elevated to co-defensive coordinator with Chris Richard, I think is his name. Could be 2 seconds, see if I can pull that real quick. Yeah, I saw it just a second ago. All right, I'm not going to spend a ton of time. I think it was Chris Richard, formerly of the Seahawks. He's been in the Saints organization for a few years now, and that has been they were co-defensive coordinators this past year. So, with that being said, let's see if I can get y'all some other fun information. As I wanted to take a little bit of time to dig in before I just started blabbing about who this guy was and what he might bring to the uh, Atlanta Falcons. So obviously, this is from PFF, everybody's favorite site. They ranked defensively; they were about middle of the pack, 16th overall. In the time that Nielsen had been the D line coach, they were in tops of the league in sacks. So that was a big emphasis that Arthur Smith had made that statement in his press conference. Wanted to get more pressure on the quarterback and things of that nature. So he taps a guy who has been responsible for one of the better defensive lines in the league. Now, what does that mean for us, right? If he brings, we can only take a stab at what they ran over there. He was a defensive line coach and has been a defensive line coach. As far as his time at NC State, he was a defensive line coach and coordinator, defensive line coach for the New Orleans Saints. He's never called plays. That's a big thing to think about and a big thing to consider. He's never called defensive plays. So it's going to be interesting to see that transition. Like I myself was under the impression that the Falcons were looking at guys like Fangio, Flores, uh, reported that they were going to be monitoring the situation with Steve Wilks. Like all these guys had an experience, right? And it really felt like coming off the hire of Dean Pease that Arthur Smith was going to tab a guy who had experience so that he could not necessarily have to hone in on the defense, not necessarily have to micromanage. That's at least that was the feeling that a lot of us got, and maybe he still isn't. Like maybe he feels like he can trust Nielsen, Nielsen. I keep wanting to say Nielsen. I think it's Nielsen. Um, maybe he feels like he can trust Nielsen with the defense. Um, but for the most part, if you're going by the Saints' defensive structure, it's going to technically be a 4-3 base, but they spent, just like the majority of the league, spent a lot of time in the nickel, right? So let's take a look at. I'm gonna get this pulled up. We'll take a look at uh, their fronts here. Okay, so in the base front, I'm gonna switch this up. Okay, you had Jordan and Granderson as their starting base, with Tuttle and Onyemata in the middle. Now, Onyemata and Tuttle, I think, are both free agents, so that's something to keep an eye on there. Okay, going into this off season. So, but when you went into base or nickel, which they ran more of, you brought in Davenport, who's also a free agent, and you put him in the on the like defensive tackle, like maybe five tech, kind of in the middle there. And then you have, obviously they had Roby, which could still be Isaiah Oliver, depending on how they want to use him. But this is going to bring up a question of, what do you do with some of the guys that we have? Do you bring back a Lorenzo Carter, right? Do you bring back an Isaiah Oliver? Do you bring back a Rashad Evans? Like, you know, he worked well for Dean Pease. Could Dean Pease ask the linebackers to come downhill? Now, is that what they're going to be doing more of? I know Demario Davis tends to come downhill, quite a bit. So, are you going to have, you're going to bring back Rashad Evans to fill that kind of role? So, going forward, it's going to be really interesting. Like, the things that Arthur Smith said he wanted was a guy who was, he wanted a defense that was multiple. Um, so that much we know. And like Nielsen, at least his track record with defensive line and defensive line play is extremely encouraging. So I'll be really interested to see, like, do they ask uh Ebiketie to bulk up some? Like, I think I was in a chat earlier, and they were talking about how, Ebiketie plays around that 250. Can he play around that 260 mark? Can he handle a little bit more bulk? Uh, you know, can what do you do with Malone? Right? Malone was more that, like, smaller, bendy guy. Do you try to play him as a, like, Sam linebacker? Are we going to go back to that, like, 4-3 under looks that Dan Quinn had? As far as, like, coverages on the back end, it does seem to be, a decent amount of single high with man to man, or, cover two, like playing like quarters coverages out of a cover two. These are all, like, things that, the vast majority of the NFL runs. So it's nothing odd, it's nothing groundbreaking, right? But as this is the first time Nielsen has ever run a defense, what are his preferences? During this process, they have let go of Ted Monachino. They have let go of Gary, the Gary Emanuel, and John Hoke. So that's the secondary coach. That's a linebacker, outside linebackers coach, and defensive line coach. Now, there's a good bit of our staff that is still out in uh, Las Vegas. Fred Bush is the acting DC. As far as I know, he's still on staff and still going to be on staff. So that's a plus there. Does Fred Bush bring that experience, that calming presence to Nielsen? Um, so interesting times in that. We're going to start digging into more, figuring out more of what this defense is going to look like now that we know who's going to be in charge and who's running it. It's the defensive line coach who's been there since 2017. He's overseen one of the best defensive lines I hate to say it like that because it's giving the Saints props, but one of the best defensive lines, year after year for the better part of a decade. So can he bring that to Atlanta? Can we have a strong defensive line for the first time in over a decade? Can we get more than I think we had 18 sacks, 20 sacks? I know we were one of the last in the league, so can we get more pressure on the quarterback? Like what are Nielsen's philosophies going to be? Is he going to be more of a blitzer or is he trying to get home with four? Like when you take a position coach and then you up him to coordinator, it's really interesting to see what he's going to bring with him. What are his ideas? He's under a guy, he's been under Dennis Allen for a while now, so now that he gets to run the show, is he going to have different approach to it? So interesting time, awesome time. Figured needed to let y'all know my thoughts. I was really hoping for a guy like a Wilkes or a Fangio, but as it drug out, those names seemed to be a little bit more of a long shot, like the Fangio and the Floreses. Was really hoping they were going to hold out for maybe Evero, but this was in a tier of uh, Jerry Gray and obviously Ryan Nielsen. But Nielsen is considered a up and coming coach. He's a good bit younger out of the guys on the list. So maybe they were going for more of a bright mind. So hey, time will tell. Hopefully, if anything else, we'll start getting after the quarterback, which would be nice to see and nice to have. As always, y'all can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Grim1128. That's GRIMM1128. You can follow Jonathan at Jonathan M. Holder. N. Holder? M. Holder. Jonathan M. Holder. He's on Twitter as well. Keep your eye on the channel. Got a lot of exciting stuff. Now we got a DC, so we can start looking at who might fit the mold of what they want. As always, Falcons fans, rise up.